Welcome to KiwaniTalk. We're a public information show put together by people from the Dearborn Kiwanis Club with help from students and staff at Dearborn High School and our club members. My name is Gary Gardner. Welcome to KiwaniTalk, the longest running cable access show in the entire world. We're happy to be here, and we're very happy to have with us lucky number 7. And I say that because our guest is the 7th mayor of the city of Dearborn. Dearborn's been around for a long time, and it speaks well for the longevity of our mayors, but we actually have our newest mayor. Welcome to the show, Mayor Abdullah Hammoud. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you here. I've interviewed you when you were aspiring to be a state rep and other things, and you're like the small town boy makes good, it looks like.
That's honestly what we're in here to do. Dearborn is home, and wherever I can be of help.
So Dearborn is home, and you grew up and you've been here for ever, right?
Correct, yeah. I mean, so born and raised in the city. My parents immigrated here back in the 70s and 80s. Went to school here, McDonald's Panther, Woodworth Hornet, Fordson Tractor. I have to say that looking at the camera, given where I am today.
Yeah.
And then
we are at Dearborn High School, by the way, one of the arch nemesis of Fordson High School,
yeah.
But we're okay.
I completed undergrad at University of Michigan Dearborn. I went to graduate school in Ann Arbor for a few years and came back, though, ultimately. I worked in healthcare for several years before ultimately running for office as a state representative in 2016.
So when you went back in 2016, what was it that wanted you or made you get into public service, running for state rep? What was the idea behind that?
It was a means of wanting to give back to a community that provided myself and my family with everything. I mean, Dearborn is, for all intents and purposes, I believe the greatest city in the world. And I wanted to do my part in ensuring that the next generation had even greater opportunity than I ever had, making sure that the greatness of Dearborn continued. And that's why I ultimately ran for state rep at the time, wanting a strong voice in Lansing to help advocate for the dollars to come down to our city, as well as for thoughtful policy solutions to get things done.
So as a state rep, and we'll backtrack a little bit, what was it that the state rep can do for the constituents in the hometown? What were you able to do as state rep for us?
So one of the most important elements of my time in office was advocating for environmental issues. We were able to make progress and push back on a lot of polluters that were heavily polluting in parts of Dearborn, especially in the south end, where we have some of the highest asthma rates in the whole state of Michigan and some of the highest asthma rates in the country, frankly. But secondly, was also an advocacy for resources. If you look now, there's a lot of construction happening around the city. Primarily, I'll highlight Miller Road and Miller Bridge. That was deemed the worst road and worst bridge in the state of Michigan. And I helped bring down $75 million to help reconstruct that roadway. We helped bring down some dollars for Henry Ford College, educational institutions, to some of our museums, to try to improve the quality of life for our residents in various aspects. So that's really the most important role, I think, for the state rep. You have your advocacy for policy, but the most important thing, I'm a big fan of the budgets of appropriations. That's where I sat during my time. And, $60 billion was being disseminated by the state of Michigan. It was good to have a strong advocate in Lansing advocating for Dearborn to get their fair share.
But not all money that comes to Dearborn's coffers comes from the state. A lot of it comes from our local, and we have an outstanding base, starting with Ford Motor Company and the other major companies that are headquartered here. And it seems like it's always been here, and they've supported our community in many, many ways besides their tax dollars too.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously property taxes are the #1 funding source for the local municipality, but when you have an opportunity to advocate for additional dollars to help supplement, it gives you an opportunity to innovate, to transform, to move Dearborn forward, and that's what we always look forward to do. We're very thankful for the major companies who are headquartered here in the city of Dearborn, such as Ford, who's been a strong partner for a generation. But also to the residents and to all the homeowners, because that's one of our largest sources of finances for the city.
And we've gone through a couple of, in some respects, tough years with COVID. We're getting past that. How, in your seat as a state rep and now as mayor, how has the COVID impacted our community and then the finances of the city?
So I'll say, let's look at it through a public health perspective. I'm going to say that I'm a public health professional by nature, so I want to answer it that. Dearborn was one of the most devastated cities by COVID. We had one of the highest case rates in the state of Michigan. And one of the reasons is we have multi-generational dwellings where you have children, their parents, their grandparents, or sometimes their great-grandparents all living in the same household. And so when you have such an infectious disease, When one person caught the virus, the whole household caught the virus, which increased our case rate, relatively speaking, to other municipalities. And so what we saw, you saw this obviously high case rates. You saw the impacts as it pertained to behavioral health on many families across the state of Michigan, higher levels of anxiety, of depression, of isolation. And that's why I think we saw a lot of folks try to go to our parks and try to re-engage with our parks. But we see that our parks need new investment just because it wasn't able to handle the capacity and to adapt to the modern use of a park. As it pertains to finances and resources, you had a lot of families that struggled and a lot of businesses that closed. And so that means those taxes, kind of go away as it comes to the city. But one of the biggest changes that you saw in the most recent election in November, the residents voted down a supplemental operating millage, which means that the city lost roughly $16 million in total in property tax collection, as well as some state dollars that came down to match the property taxes that you levied. And so we had a fairly difficult budget process in the first 6 months. We had a $22 million deficit that we had to address, and we're on pathway to making sure that Dearborn is structurally balanced without asking residents for new taxes.
Just backtrack to some of the business closings. What, do you have any feel or any numbers of the number of actual businesses that closed? And what are the, you drive along and I notice on some of the areas I travel, there's a strip malls and a number of the stores have closed.
Yeah.
What's the city planning for, what's the numbers if you know, and what's the city planning to do to help?
I don't have any numbers as we came in January, and we're trying to build up our data capacity within the city to begin to produce these types of reports. But what's important to note is, you have the traditional turnaround for a business. Many businesses don't last 5 years. Restaurants, let's take restaurants as an example. In the restaurant industry, your turnover is probably 5 years, 50%. 50% of restaurants that open up more than likely close within the first 5 years. And so that turnover might have been accelerated. And so you see new businesses popping up where old businesses had exited during the COVID pandemic. And so for us, what we really want to do is ensure that our economic development team is tailoring its offerings to businesses. So something that we're rolling out by the end of the year, we're going to establish business liaisons within our downtown district authorities and our various business corridors. And their sole responsibility and duty is to be going to proactively visiting businesses, 20 to 40 every single month, and trying to ask the small business owners, what supports do you need from the city? How can we assist you with maybe doing governmental contracting? That's something that we're advocating for here in the city of Dearborn. We passed an ordinance recently that says if you are a Dearborn-based business and you're applying to do work with the city of Dearborn for a contract that's less than $100,000, even if you are not the lowest bid by a buffer of 10%, we would still prefer you because we get to keep our dollars within our city. And so we're really trying to promote this Dearborn bets on Dearborn mentality and attitude. And we really want to make sure that we're listening to the small business owners, we're listening to entrepreneurs, we're listening to our partners such as Ford, Carhartt, and several others in the industrial space or automotive space to see what we can be doing more to ensure that we keep these institutions here, that they employ Dearborn residents, that our children are receiving the right education so that they're work ready when they graduate, and hopefully continue us on a pathway to succeed.
One of the things you said in passing, but I don't think people realize, you said the downtown business authorities or associations. And for people who don't know, there's more than one downtown Dearborn.
Correct.
How many downtowns does Dearborn actually have?
So we have 2 downtown development authorities. So your West Downtown Development Authority, which is kind of, your West Downtown, where Wagner Place is and such. Then you have your East DDA, which is kind of East Michigan Avenue. We also have 2 business corridors. That would be Warren and Schaefer. So Warren being the large stretch from Warren, Wyoming, all the way to Warren Greenfield. And then you have the South End Business Corridor, which is your Dix-Verner Business Corridor.
And so for people, we go to 43 cities. Some people aren't familiar with Dearborn. We're a pretty spread out city.
We're a fairly large city.
Cut down the middle by Southfield Freeway, and that's east meets west, right where Ford headquarters is. And so the west part of it is West Dearborn Authority. East Dearborn runs along Michigan Avenue, pretty much over to the Detroit border, over Wyoming. And you mentioned the Warren Avenue, which is about a mile and a half north of Michigan Avenue, and that whole corridor up there. But then the Dix area, talk about that. It's a very special area down there.
That's where, if you trace our history back to just about every major ethnic group that's ever settled in Dearborn, they all got their roots starting in the South End. And that, to me, that's kind of the heart of the city of Dearborn, of the South End, because we can all trace back at some point in time, us or our parents or our grandparents all started out in the South End. And so they have a relatively small business corridor. And so when I talk about business corridors or DDAs, what formalizes them is that there's a tax that's captured by those businesses, and rather than the city receiving those taxes that businesses pay, they actually go to these corridors. And these corridors' purposes is to help elevate these corridors overall, to support these small business owners, to make developments, to encourage patrons to come and patronize these businesses. So the West DDA, the East DDA, the Warren Schaefer Business Corridor, the Dix Verner Business Corridor, all collect their own taxes. They don't come to the city. And then the city, in turn, we work through the various appointed boards to make sure we're reinvesting back in those corridors.
And we can't help but mention Ford Motor Company and the massive construction project that's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gonna, there's a huge number of people, and I think COVID may have changed part of that dynamic where there's less people coming in, but what's going on with Ford? There's all this construction going on over there.
There are several major developments by Ford. First is obviously the new campus that's being constructed across from the Greenfield Village. They're going to be their new modern mobility campus. Had a great meeting with Bill Ford not too long ago, talking about the future of this campus, and we think it'll be live kind of in the next 4 years or so. It's going to be transformational, and I'm really excited to see what it looks like and where it takes the city of Dearborn. The second major development by Ford is actually at the plant, Rouge Factory, but also at the plant where they're constructing the F-150 Lightning. I was there earlier today, and they're actually expanding out to be able to produce more trucks to employ more people. And these are good paying union jobs. And so really excited for that transformation as well.
And that whole Rouge plant, like I still call it the Rouge plant.
Yeah.
I've only been here since I was ninth grade, it's 1967, so still a Rouge plant for me, but it's a whole major area down there, and and all the electrification of the vehicles and that construction has got to be very exciting for Ford and for Dearborn.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always an exciting time when you have a major business or entity such as Ford that's expanding the opportunities in its hometown.
One other thing I think we have to talk about is the Henry Ford.
Yeah.
Greenfield Village, Henry Ford Museum, one of the major tourist attractions in the world. And people just don't realize that people come from all over the world to our city to see that. And that helps with the hotels, with the restaurants, all the other associated things. What does the Henry Ford mean to Dearborn?
I'm a member, so I'm going to be very biased in my answer. Me and my family frequent often, and the leadership at the Henry Ford has been a strong partner for us. They have, I think they're surpassing 1.5 million visitors a year at this point. They work well with our schools to do the school trips. They also have their own school, the Henry Ford Academy, obviously also instituted inside of Greenfield Village and the Henry Ford Museum. But when you have institutions such as the Henry Ford, such as the Dearborn Historical Museum, such as the Arab American National Museum, these are tourist attractions that help bring people to visit your city. And when they're here visiting your city, they're also spending dollars at your local businesses and supporting our families who are invested here in the city of Dearborn. So whatever we can do to support these entities, support these efforts, I encourage all of us to do so.
Well, we're going to take a break here for a minute. We're going to come back and talk with the lucky number 7 mayor, City of Dearborn, Abdullah Hammoud. But before we come back, some words about Kiwanis from students who put together some of these ads. Don't go away. We'll come back and talk about the mayor. What's going to happen in the future of Dearborn?
Who is a kid? Well, that's a kid. And another. Look, a gaggle of them. Or is it a herd? Litter? Pride. But what about her? Tell her she's not a kid. Or him. So how do we tell who is a kid? Height? Age, maybe. But some of us have to grow up faster than others. A kid. A kid. A kid wants to make the world better. And one day, he just might. Is a kid fearless? Vulnerable? Strong? Nervous? Yes. 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 Kiwanis is 600,000 kids at heart doing all the little and big things it takes to help children around the world. Because kids need Kiwanis. All of them.
Welcome back to KiwaniTalk. I'm your host, Gary Gardner, with the mayor of the city of Dearborn, Abdullah Hammoud, the 7th mayor of the city. I mentioned at the beginning, Dearborn's been a city for a long time, but we've had mayors. Mayor Hubbard lasted for many years, one of the longest serving mayors in all time.
Yeah.
How long do you expect to be mayor? Following, you're young enough, you can probably outlive or outserve Hubbard.
I don't know if I want to do that. You know, my hope is to serve for as long as my service is meaningful, and ultimately for as long as the voters would like me. I'm planning it as I go. I don't have any thoughts in my mind of for how long, but the unique thing is I got elected in November, and my daughter came in December.
Okay.
And so I'm watching, you know, how long I've been in office based on how fast my daughter's growing.
Right.
And you realize how fast time goes by when you finally have a child and you see them growing before your eyes.
I'll tell you, I'll give you some advice from an older guy. I'm not, you know, it's okay not to know what you're going to do, because I'm still not sure what I want to be when I grow up. So we're good. But talk about service to the city, community. We're part of the Dearborn Kiwanis Club, and we're one of the oldest clubs in the country. And we sell peanuts, and through the support of the mayor and other members of the community, we're the #1 peanut selling club in the entire world.
I agree. I think so too.
And that is an actuality. 1 year
Just
after a
insert
hurricane.
the fact check here.
This fact check, the longest running cable access show in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Biggest peanut selling club in the world, except for 1 year when a club in Florida after a hurricane made some extra money. But we sell peanuts, and we're going to be out on the street this week. We get permission from the city to go out and do that, and we get support from your office and everybody else. What is not just Kiwanis, but what do service clubs do in your mind as the mayor to help the city out and help our citizens out?
Well, first and foremost, Kiwanis is one of my favorite service clubs. And I think Dearborn is historically known as a community that is recognized for its strong service clubs. And so for me, it's an opportunity for you to connect with residents from all corners of the city, to do good and to give back. And ultimately, that's what I think it means to be a Dearbornite. Rolling up your sleeves, regardless of what it is you do from 9 to 5, to come together, to raise some dollars, to support a lot of initiatives that are meaningful to so many here in the community. And so I'll be out there supporting the Kiwanis Club with the peanut sales, and I hope residents stop by, grab a great bag of peanuts. If you throw a 5, a 10, a 100, we're not going to complain. We'll take your money, and hopefully use those dollars to give back to the community that we all love.
And we want people to know that the money that we get from our peanut sales, other than the actual cost of the peanuts, 100% of it goes back into our community. All the overhead, all the administration costs, all that we supply through our dues and our other activities. But the money that you give for peanuts, other than the cost, goes back into the community.
So what more can you ask for?
You can't ask for more than that. So, you know, we talked about Dearborn. It has been a good place. It's a great place. But where does Abdullah Hammoud see, what's your vision going forward for the city of Dearborn, Mr. Mayor?
I think the best way to speak to that, when I met with Bill Ford, he shared a point with that which I thought was mind-blowing. He said if Henry Ford were to come back, Henry Ford could essentially assume the reins of Ford Motor Company today, because not much has changed within the company. You know, it's the same kind of style of production. The factory still exists, selling the cars to the dealerships and out to the residents. However, over the next 10 years, Ford will transform more than it has the last 100. And when I walked out of that meeting, I thought to myself, how can a company like Ford transform in the next decade if the city does not match that level of transformation? And so what that means is we have to be more agile. We have to deliver services to a higher quality degree than we ever have before. We have to modernize our infrastructure, whether that's water and sewer, our streets, the computer and IT software that we use internally, to make sure that folks can be able to frequent the city of Dearborn and receive the services that they need outside of the constraints of time and place, 9 to 5 at City Hall. We obviously have our city website. We need to modernize that, the applications. And so it's my hope that Dearborn sets a precedent for what it means to transform over this next decade, alongside major institutions. So when you look at Ford, you think the innovation that they're doing with electric cars, you hopefully look to the city of Dearborn and you compare that with the transformation they're doing with how cities deliver services. And so that's very high level view, and I'm hoping over the next several months you'll start seeing some of those announcements on what those specifics actually look like.
And that computer, the high-tech stuff is really important for the future, but there's also more basic stuff that's been around for 100 years. It gets clogged up when it rains, and there's been a history in Dearborn of problems with our sewer system.
Yeah.
So what's going on with that? I didn't understand the city's completed a study, and what's going on?
So there's several things happening as it pertains to the flooding front. I know everyone is still, myself included, my basement flooded last year, my family's basement, my sister-in-law's basement several times. And so a few things have moved forward. One, we took opportunity, MDOT, the state, was digging up one of its roads, its trunk lines, and so we took the opportunity to insert what's called a flap valve. This flap valve is the equivalent of like a backflow preventer in a residential home. Only when you insert it on a major sewer line, it'll basically act like a backflow preventer on about 3,000 homes. So we had an opportunity to do it for one neighborhood for about 3,000 homes, kind of East Dearborn, kind of near Chase. The second thing we moved forward was a water and sewer evaluation study. So we just commenced this study. It'll take about 2 years, and the contractors that we selected will do a full evaluation, including having community input at several points throughout the study, trying to give us an objective viewpoint of where we need to improve our water and sewer infrastructure, as well as how we can improve the greening of the city of Dearborn. How can we have more rain gardens or more retention basins or catch basins, things of that nature to help collect and retain water during moments when we have high storms. And then the third, we're going to be investing in a lot of green space. That means reevaluating our parks, trying to think what more we can do to make sure that those areas are collecting water. We went to Grand Rapids with the schools. And what we took away from there, Grand Rapids had this unique methodology for how it used resources that it had to make every park have a rain garden feature that helped catch and retain water during major storms.
Explain what a rain garden is for people.
A rain garden essentially is a unique area that you plant, but it's designed to collect more water than a traditional garden might, and to retain that water. So those plants are high absorbing, they absorb high volumes of water. But also if any water were to leave that rain garden, it leaves at a slower speed, so that when it enters your sewer system, it kind of buys you time and it buys you capacity. Because ultimately what happened with the flooding was we had too much rain in a short amount of time and not enough space for that rain in our sewer system.
Now, we've been doing this show for 29 years, and many 20 plus years ago, the mayor at the time came in. We got this great new combined sewer system. We're going to put these big holes in the ground and collect the water, and
many of those failed.
Hundreds of millions of dollars and things like that. So whatever that lesson was, Mr. Mayor, when you get your study back in 2 years, please pay attention and make sure that mistake isn't followed.
I think that's why it was important to get a third party objective viewpoint. There was a conversation of, do we just do the analysis internally? And my thought process was and I appreciate all of our engineers or engineering department, but you can't get folks who built the system over 25 years to then give you an honest evaluation of it. It's like you asking me, how do you think you're doing as a mayor? I'm gonna tell you great every time you ask me. Areas for improvement, but you're gonna get a far more objective answer if I were to ask the residents, how do you think Hammoud is doing as a mayor? So that's what we're doing with this water and sewer study. We're asking the experts who are not employed by the city and might be biased.
So we're down to our last couple of minutes here, but what is the standard, the scale that Abdullah Hammoud's going to judge his first year in office, and then the rest of your term in office? What's it going to be? That's
a tough one. I hold a very high bar for myself, higher than others would have of me. And so for me, objectively, the way I look at it, being a new father with my daughter, the way I measure success now is with the critical decisions that I'm making. I ask myself, is my daughter going to be better off? So I think after the first year, I'm really going to ask myself that question and do a deep dive with my whole team. Did we do enough within this first year where I can point to my daughter or other young people in the city and say that in this first year we have made major gains in ensuring that their quality of life, the opportunities that they have, the city that we are going to leave them is better than we first assumed in January 1 of 2022. If the answer is yes, then I think we've done good, and I'll keep pushing the limit to see how far we can go. And if the answer is no, we have to recalibrate and see what more we can be doing in the time that has been allotted to us.
So, I hope our taxes aren't going to go up, but when the city asks for money for renewing projects,
Yeah.
don't say no. I mean, I think if you have a good steward of the funds, like your administration is.
And I agree with you. The good thing that came out of the budget cycle is we are now working within the constraints of the tax millage that's provided to the city based on our city constitution, our city charter. And we have no intent on going back to the residents and asking for more taxes. And so the millage failed in November, about 3.5 mils, which was again about $16 million. We have no intent on going back to residents to asking them for those dollars. So most residents experienced a tax reduction in the most recent tax bill that was mailed out.
I saw your letter. I saw that. It was great.
We tried explaining, correct.
Yeah.
And so we have no intention on going back to ask for more taxes. I'm very mindful, especially now where you have inflation rates that are skyrocketing and the cost of goods for a working family is really, it's really hurting the bottom line. And we have no intention at this point to go back to the voters to ask them to increase the amount of money they're giving us as a city. I think we have to demonstrate, one, that we have the trust of the residents to do what's best with the resources we already have, and work on trying to deliver quality services while reducing costs. It is difficult, it's not an easy challenge to do, but if we utilize technology, if we make innovations, if we partner with the appropriate organizations, and we hopefully have some announcements to come, we think we can do just that.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we're 8 months into your administration. I think that the residents should be comfortable with the fact that you're here. You've got the leadership, you've got the experience, and I, for one, feel pretty good that we're going to keep Dearborn on a good path.
Thank you so much.
Your daughter turns 18, and you've been mayor for 18 years. We'll come back, but I want you to come back next year and every year so we can talk about what's been going on in the city.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for coming on
so
on the show. Thank you for watching KiwaniTalk. I'm Gary Gardner. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye. And don't forget to buy peanuts on our peanut sales all over the city and all over the internet and wherever else you can find them. Thank you very much. There you go, all over me.